What's up, guys? Are we live? We're live. There we go. Starting off well. How's it going, everybody? I'm Jeff Easterling, Grim Brother 1 here at 343 Industries. I am joined by my good buddy, my friend and colleague, Mr. Kenneth Peters, right over here, sneaking into the frame. How's it going? All right. It's always some really good fun times when we get to get together. And really what this is it's just like putting a camera in front of the types of conversations that we pretty much have all the time anyway. So this one is we have to be a little bit more careful about because we can't tell you necessarily all the things on this one. But we are hanging out today, getting ready for our I guess it's our second lore-based stream. The first one was super cool. If you missed that, well, you're a terrible person. But you should, you can rectify that. You can actually go and check it out. I know it is online on video on demand. I believe it was one of our Halo community updates that we had that in, so you can watch it on demand there. And we did our first one on Halo Warfleet. Halo Warfleet, actually, primary penman, this guy right here. If you haven't read Halo Warfleet, you're, again, a terrible person. Because it is awesome. If you like Halo and spaceships or space and ships or any word that start with those same letters, you should really read it. It's super awesome. A lot of cool information. We did a whole stream on it. Today, though, we are focusing on arguably maybe the most important aspect of all of the Halo lore, and that is literally the thing that gives our franchise its namesake, and that is the Halo array or the Halo rings themselves. So we're actually going to be going through and talking about kind of the overall Halo array. So a lot of this will be information that longtime super deep lore fans are going to be pretty familiar with because, again, it's something that is kind of the foundation of all of our fiction and most of the games. But we're hoping that some new fans maybe are sneaking in, and maybe you have seen some stuff about the Halos, but you're wondering a little bit. It's actually, we were talking about it. It's been a while since we actually, even since the games really kind of talked about, the Halos in general. So we're going to kind of dive into some of that. But we might also sneak some tidbits that maybe some deep lore fans are a little bit more unfamiliar with, or we'll create discussions and inevitable arguments in a place like Reddit and the Halo Archive. So we just live to provide consternation. That's really what we do. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I like the title of this, the Rings of Destruction.
Yeah, so it has a little bit of a evocative.
It's just very thematic.
So this was part of our Halo Seminar series, which is our internal lore presentations that we give about every month on various topics about the Halo franchise and Halo lore to people internal here in the studio. So we've modified this, obviously, so that not giving away anything that would potentially be
no secrets for you.
Problematic.
No secrets, no dabs.
Yeah, no dabs. That's very.
We know that is 1/3 of the comments in chat.
And Halos are not flat, so that's no flat Earth Halo.
No, yeah.
So this was originally given by Jeremy. Jeremy couldn't be here today, so I'm kind of stepping in to go over this today. So title of the seminar is called Rings of Destruction. And it's a picture of a Halo. So what is Halo? Well, fictionally, it's 7 ring-world installations, which actually form a weapon network that can destroy all sentient life in the galaxy once they fire and then resonate with each other. They'll kill all sentient life. Basically, anything above the neurological complexity of a bumblebee, approximately, they'll get rid of. But narratively, they're basically the gun pointed at the head of the universe in our
one of my
franchise.
favorite chapter titles.
Yeah,
it's
very kind of symbolic.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's basically the ultimate peril for the galaxy, and Halo Combat Evolved ramps up very quickly from the fate of what happens to you on the Pillar of Autumn to all the way up to the fate of all life in the galaxy in a single game. So, and that's because Halo is so potentially destructive. So a lot of people, especially if you've a longtime Halo fan, you kind of remember the first time you actually appear on the Halo Ring after you get out of that cramped Pillar of Autumn level, which is kind of, at the time, especially a very traditional FPS type of environment. And then you crash on the Bumblebee, and then you come out of the Bumblebee and you see the vista,
Yeah.
and you see that the wildlife, and then by the second thing you see is either the artificial bridge, which
Yeah.
kind of hints that this is artificial. There's some artificial aspects to this environment, and then off in the distance you see the plasma shots going up in the air to kind of draw you over towards the first.
It's an
Halo
iconic,
relay
yeah.
tower.
It's an iconic moment, not only just of Halo history, but really of video game history as well, because there was that really interesting transition, kind of going from the very traditional corridor-based, more claustrophobic shooter element to now kind of turning it on its head. And especially, of course, the Xbox had just launched, and I think there was almost kind of some imagery there that was evocative of kind of like a sea change and maybe a paradigm shift in even kind of the way that we play games and shooters. Is like now all of a sudden it wasn't just in these tight closets and corridors and hallways. Is now you had this huge area to kind of explore. And I mean, even just seeing some of these images right here again definitely brings up some good memories. I know for me, I remember playing countless runs of the Silent Cartographer demo. And I'm sure a lot of you guys actually have some awesome memories of this stuff too. In fact, if you do have good memories, post them here in the chat. We're actually taking a look at the chat while one of us is talking. Usually the other one is looking at fun things in the chat, and we'll answer things that don't have to do with dabbing or future Halo titles. But we'd love to have kind of carry the conversation on. But if you have any favorite Halo moments, whether it be like your first stepping out onto one, or maybe some other vistas through the games. I remember one of my favorites too is when the replacement ring in Halo 3 kind of is emerging from the foundry.
Clouds,
is super super cool. But again, if you're just joining us too, tuning in. I'm Jeff Easterling, Grim Brother 1, 343. This is Kenneth Peters, franchise writer here at 343, and this is our second lore stream. We're talking about the Halo array. Definitely hang out with us in chat. And again, we're going through right now kind of like some of our favorite Halo memories, but we're actually about to also dive deeper into kind of the anatomy, really, of not just the Halo rings themselves, but even the array as well, because the array, the collection of rings, kind of works together in certain ways as kind of like one entity as well.
Yeah, we kind of treat them individually as characters, really within the stories. A lot of the major Forerunner artifacts we treat broadly within the franchise as characters. So they have arcs, they change, and they evolve, and they have their own character and stuff throughout the stories that we have. I'm seeing some questions here about like how atmosphere works and stuff like that. We're not going to get too much into the weeds on some of the specific structural characteristics of the rain, like how does Rayleigh scattering work on the rain atmosphere and stuff like that. We actually have answered a lot of that like before internally, but this particular presentation we're not going to be going over that. We just don't have enough time, unfortunately, to go over every little
the chat's going to be
detail.
weeping and gnashing of teeth as far as time. Yeah.
That's
No 6-hour lore streams yet.
So
we got approval for that one.
First, let's talk about why the Halos were made. So we kind of just broadly, the Halo array is a weapon. It's designed to destroy sapient or sentient life in the galaxy to deny the flood food. But kind of a little bit of deeper dive there. So it was built by the Forerunners, who are one of the precursor species in our franchise. So they vanished / were killed off / left the galaxy 100,000 years ago.
/ yeah.
Yeah. So 300 years before the activation of Halo, the flood was unleashed in the galaxy. And then the Forerunners were fighting the flood infection for a little over 3 centuries. And then they were losing. So one of the ways that they were trying to figure out a way of fighting the flood, one of the final methods that they kind of figured out was, hey, we can just deny the flood hosts. So that was really the only way of stopping or slowing them down. So they designed the Halo arrays. There's actually 2 different Halo arrays, and we'll talk a little about that here in a second. So the array, the array that we know of from Halo Combat Evolved all the way up to Halo 5 Guardians is the 7 Ring World installations. That now 6 Ring World installations /7 at the end of Halo Wars 2. Those were part of what was called a conservation measure, which was the archival and indexing of sapient and sentient species that were unaffected by the flood by the librarian and her life workers. Those samples were stored on the Halo rings temporarily as staging areas, and then they were transported to the Ark for final storage and archival. And then after the Halo rings fired and scoured the galaxy clean of life, they used those samples and the library samples basically to repopulate the galaxy with the species we
I
know
think
now.
I think one of the coolest elements, or one of my favorite pieces of Halo fiction, especially older school Halo fiction too, is actually a piece that gives us, in many ways, some of our best looks and some of our oldest and best knowledge of things like the conservation measure and reintroduction, and that's the Halo 3 terminals.
Yeah.
Like if you've never done that, Halo 3, I mean, play it on the Master Chief Collection. You can also play it on backwards compatibility on your Xbox One if you've got it. But it is absolutely worth your while to kind of trudge around and find the terminals located throughout the levels in Halo 3. They're a little bit different than the terminals as the terminals would kind of continue later on in Halo 4 and some of the later games as they're primarily text-based. But I actually really like that. It's a very kind of old-school mud client text-based style, where it provided a really cool, interesting, deep backstory that was there for the people that wanted to find it, but didn't kind of beat you over the head with it for people who were just wanting to play the game. But those terminals actually talk a lot about the conservation measure and really gave us our most in-depth look to the time yet, even at just Forerunners themselves. Like, it was really the first kind of life Forerunners had been given from a fictional standpoint. And you get the interactions with the librarian and the didact. That's the first time really we start to see the didact. But you also get the interactions between Mr. Mendicant Bias, a Forerunner in Scylla.
The rogue process.
Yes.
Ghost rogue process.
Yeah, that contender class, flip flopper, and also the Gravemind. So a lot of really, really cool deep lore there. And there's some awesome community outlets too. Where you can find that. I believe halo.bungie.org still has a really cool, I think it's like a Flash-based kind of interactive version of the Halo 3 terminals.
It tries to replicate all the animations.
Yeah, it's super, super cool.
Searching.
So if you're wanting to, just see it on the web, definitely go and check it out there. But there's nothing like actually going and searching them out yourselves. But that's where we originally find. So one of the things we want to kind of do, too, with some of these lore streams is not only just explain things, but a lot of times what we're saying is stuff that is actually already public, but maybe only a few people know it. Only a few people have scoured it. You get your people like your TOA freaks from Halo Canon, your Hidden Xperias and Haruspis and CIA, your Halopedians, your Stephen Loftuses, and your Halo Archive folks and things like that. But we want to try to expand that and also not just talk to you about the lore, but also tell you where to find it and how to experience it yourself. So.
Yeah, and I know some comments about the books being mandatory for the games. I don't think that's necessarily true. A lot of stuff we're going to be talking about actually here is, I mean, Halo 3 was probably the primary source for a lot of the background for the Forerunners, but we also have obviously the Greg Bear trilogy that heavily informs a lot about the Forerunners, which I'm sure some people don't like. But
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's something that's we have. I know there are, discussions that happen in the community about it, and I have had some of those discussions with folks in forums and social media. But it's a really careful balance that actually we try to have as, creators and curators of this kind of stuff, of how do you create additional stuff like books and comics and terminals and all kinds of things that reward at the same time, reward people who do search them out and who do read all the stuff and give them kind of an enhanced look at the universe, but also doesn't punish the people who don't. And I would say there's not. I don't know if I would consider a whole lot as required reading. There are certain things that always improvements that can be made for sure, as far as giving baby better backstory on something. But a lot of the stuff that's out there, specifically books and comics and things like that, are really there to enhance the overall experience, so that you can kind of find out a little bit more, maybe more about a backstory or more about what happened to a side character or situation and stuff like that. But it's all really, really good feedback, and always something that we're looking for, and looking at as we go forward, creating cool new content.
Sure, and I mean, kind of building off of that, when we were doing Halo 2 Anniversary for the Master Chief Collection, when we were putting the terminal videos in, there was a lot of discussion about how we would do the terminals. We got a lot of feedback. We have actually
What do
some
we
metrics.
show? Time frames, perspectives.
Well, it was
Yeah,
also
like
we had a lot of feedback from Halo 1 anniversary about the terminals regarding well, not only just fan feedback about the terminals and
yep.
about them in general, but also how easy were they to find, how many people actually viewed them. We actually have metrics for how many people actually watched all of the terminal videos from Halo 1 anniversary.
Yeah.
So in Halo 2 anniversary, we actually were very deliberate about trying to make sure all the terminals were in locations that you could find fairly easily. They were not designed to be super hardcore, hidden, do crazy jumps and stuff to get to. Like even some of the Halo 3 terminals.
Oh yeah,
where we had to do some crazy jumps and stuff.
For sure.
Some of those.
And I think there are ways that you can kind of split from a game design standpoint. You can kind of split some of those things out. Yeah. Like you can make like the skulls, for example, which don't necessarily have a bearing on the lore itself, but you can make the skulls as something that takes a little bit more like searching, finding, trick jumping, and things like that. But making sure that some of the lore, especially if it's any kind of crucial piece, that it is something that every player, or at least most players, will definitely encounter if it's something to, that has a big impact.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far off topic on the background lore. I mean, that's part actually why we did Mythos.
You guys did this. You talked about it.
Yeah,
Myth,
I mean,
we blame you.
If you kind of want to know why we did Mythos, that was actually one of the reasons. We had all these different sources, and some had like different little tidbits of information about certain topics, and so Mythos was to try to kind of tie that all in together. So sorry, but back to the Halo seminar. So the Halo-Reans were part of the conservation measure staging species for indexing, which not only meant live samples, actually putting species into basically stasis, as you see actually in Origins. You see species being put into these stasis blocks, like I call it carbonite blocks, even though it's not carbonite. But then they also had they just genetically sampled a large selection of the population, both for flora and fauna, and then they just basically cloned them back on their home planets. So the Halo-Reans were in the background as part of a compromise between the builders and the life workers. It had both a weapon function and a life preservation function. So it's kind of two halves of the same coin, war and peace. So why was it even built? Well, it was built to fight the flood. If you're not familiar, this is actually a quote from an ARG from way back in the day.
It's Iris?
Iris, yeah. So I just think this is a really rad quote. There's a lot of really cool stuff from Iris and some of our other ARGs or ARGs. I don't like calling them ARGs, but the alternate reality games that we've had. There's a lot of really cool stuff.
That's gonna exclamation, really.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, there are two sets of rings. We have what we call the senescent array, which is the original 30,000 kilometer diameter rings that were built by the master builder to fight the flood. Those were primarily almost dedicated weapon installations. Those had quite a bit different function than the rings that we currently know of right now. This is much from the Greg Bear novels. Much larger. They had much larger populations that were being stored on them.
Also different firing methods.
Different firing methods. Well. They fired in a cone, so they were semi-directional. Like you could basically target planets or star clusters with these things and just do kind of localized cleansing. But the flood spread too fast, too far, and then most of the rings were taken over by Mendican Bias at the urgings of his little buddy, the Primordial. And so most of them were destroyed. One survived, or at least one that we know of, I should say. That's actually, to be clear, there's one that we know survived. The other ones are kind of an area of canonical doubt. And that one ring joined what we now call the Neoteric Array, which originally was 6 installations. There's 7 because one of the rings from that senescent array, the original Halo Array installations, were basically retrofitted to function within the new.
I see CIA in the chat yelling, "Yay, a source!" Because this actually is so. This we talk about not really giving a lot of necessarily new lore, but expanding and clarifying and explaining current stuff. However, we do like to drop little narrative nuggets throughout that are new to most folks, and this is an example of that. So this is really like the senescent array and the neoteric array. That nomenclature that we are using is really only primarily so far has been internal. We did show it to a few fans out for last year's PAX community visit, where we did some cool little workshops and things here at the studio. But this is really the first kind of like public knowledge of this classification. and it actually kind of goes along. Somebody else had asked in the chat, is there like a singular Halo Bible or like one kind of source? And this is actually a great way to talk about that, because we do have essentially a singular, growing, evolving source. And the Halo Bible absolutely is/was a thing as far as a physical object. A lot of people I know have the romanticized dusty tome. Yes,
you open up
we actually just go, and we don't write stories. We just go and consult the tome, and it tells us everything.
golden quill.
Yeah,
But no, they're actually like Word documents.
yeah,
instead of
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
They're actually
lots
Halo
of binders.
Bible.
But as a lot of things move these days, we've actually moved all of that digitally, and so we actually have. For example, you have like the Halopedia and Halo Nation is like really the online repository, the public wikis. We actually have an internal one for us, and so we're
The library.
yeah, exactly. We have the library and the index, which is a repository of that information, everything from images and concept art to actual just full encyclopedic articles. And in those encyclopedic articles, we have information on stuff that is not public. Holes that are filled in, information that maybe is for future telling or is fodder for a different time. But this is an example of that. We have internal nomenclature for those two types of Halo rings. And so this is an example of taking that and turning that something that is private facing and now public.
Yeah, I should point out, like even internally in the studio, we generally don't talk about the senescent array. It just confuses people.
Yeah.
Because then he has to get into this whole other discussion
Big
about
studio, not
the flood
everybody does
war and we generally, when we talk about Halo array, if you ever hear us talk about it, we're really talking about, in this particular nomenclature, we're calling the Neoteric array the new Halo array. So just kind of keep that in mind. Some of this is more for our internal organization to try to keep things straight, to make sure we're talking about, when we're talking about the Gaia rings, those are the senescent array.
It's also, too, somebody was like, just release it all. But it's also important to note that a lot of that internal information sometimes we keep it internal so that it has the ability to flex and to change before going public. Because once it goes public, we try super, super hard as much as possible to not have to go and just outright, retcon or change things. So it kind of stays in a little bit of like kind of a midway larval state while other things, other stakes in the ground form. And then once it makes more sense to kind of have some of that stuff come public. So it is very deliberate, as far as like kind of the rollout for information like that over different channels like this or Cannon Fodder or, the games and books and comics themselves. So.
Yeah, I see from CIA they're asking questions fans have had about the Halo rings, and we get a lot of on the franchise team. We get asked questions about the Halo rings, sometimes just purely for people's personal knowledge. It's kind of like, I played the Halo game and I was wondering, how does this work? Like where do these beetles come from?
What is the Halos?
Yeah, and so we've had to answer a lot of interesting questions about the Halo rings, even internally, that aren't not tied to any game or any project. They're just people here in the studio are interested in it.
Yeah.
So the new Halo array, the 6 Halo rings, and then the reconditioned Halo ring from the Neoteric, from the senescent array, those were built at what we call the Ark. If you read the Greg Bear novels, you know that this is actually the lesser Ark. It's actually the second Ark complex. In Halo Mythos, we actually show the first Ark complex, the first Ark factory, getting destroyed by the Star Roads. And so, when I start mentioning like Star Roads and all this stuff, okay, then it starts getting to super deep lore. That's why we don't generally talk about it, even here in the studio.
That's
there's
a
lot to
image,
cover.
Right?
Is that what? Yeah, that is a Loftus image over there on the right.
Shout out to Stephen Loftus.
So,
he does a lot of really cool work with us.
And we've actually mentioned in the War Fleet, Stephen Loftus is actually
he's a
contributor and a collaborator on a lot of our projects, specifically stuff that involves numbers, scale, double checking names, double checking. I mean, we know a lot of this stuff and we have our own internal documents, but oftentimes, as you well know, sometimes even what the internal documents say doesn't match what we've said publicly or has been shown in another source. This is particularly the case of weapons, by the way.
Yeah.
So Loftus is kind of our
He's a great check and balance.
Check,
yeah,
particularly for stuff that's been released publicly. Because sometimes we get confused, like, okay, we have all this information from all these different internal sources and internal documents, design documents, and then it's like, wait, but what was actually public? Like this just came up recently with some date stuff regarding. I almost said it, but I can't say it. But it came up with some date stuff. We're like, wait,
well, it actually came up even with when we were developing, for example, Awakening the Nightmare, like dates for the Vanished and stuff came up with. like when did things happen? Because when you're simultaneously we're doing things, Halo Wars 2 obviously was done, but then Awakening the Nightmare was being developed, and then you also have things like the Rise of Atriox comic. So trying to make sure that all of the dates line up, and it's like, okay, well, like if any of you guys have done any kind of world building or creating or things like that, even if you're like a musician, you're writing music, like there's a development process where there's things that will ebb and flow and change, and the thing that you end up with isn't exactly what you started with. And it's the same thing with creating fiction like this, especially with a really big, long-standing universe with a lot of different ways to absorb that universe, is you have dates that flex and move, and you put it one, it seems like a good idea at first, but then halfway through the development, you're like, oh wait, there's no time to do this, and so it's great to have an extra check.
There's actually two good examples of that. So the image there you see on the right of the arc, if you look at the Halo 3 design documentation, they actually lay out where all the missions take place, including the cut missions such as Guardian Forest and stuff, to help the level designers figure out, okay, where does this take place? Like how long would it take Chief to get from one area to another if they want to change the skybox? And then for Halo Wars 2, we actually had it all planned out of how the missions would progress down basically one of the arms of the arc during the early days of Halo Wars 2. And we actually were calculating, I was calculating, we actually made a map coordinate system for the arc, and I was calculating how long it would take a Pelican to get from one area to the next. And so they were actually going to have in-game timers basically in Halo Wars 2 kind of saying this takes place at 0600 hours on this date and this mission. And then we're like, well, it's getting a little complicated. We're not going to do get too in the weeds, because then missions got cut. And
exactly. Well, and I know a lot of people, I'm sure, oh, but that would have been really, really awesome. But at the same time, too, sometimes the more you put in there, the more you kind of overcomplicate it, and then you back yourself into corners, and you don't want to get into a position where you have to change something. Then everybody gets mad because then you had to change something. So
and things like the arcs and the Halo reigns, it's even kind of more of an issue because a lot of this stuff took place 100,000 years ago. Yeah. So then we have these giant time gaps. We even got to be careful when we're talking about millennia.
Oh yeah.
Which millennia did this take place in? And you see this in the Halo 2, or excuse me, the Halo 1 anniversary terminals with Guilty Spark, where he's mentioning dates, and it's like,
well, I mean, even going through and trying to when we're going through, and if maybe we're writing an internal, encyclopedia article, or even what we were doing for Mythos, is trying to catalog through the Greg Bear books and Forerunner history, where you have these huge jumps,
hundreds
of years, where in something like First Strike, something would have been 3 months later or 2 weeks later. The Forerunner trilogy, you'll have something happen. They had dinner. 400 years later, they went and did some other thing.
And then it gets a little like in Primordium is a good example where, I love the Greg Bear novels, but I'm not going to, but there's some spots in the Greg Bear Primordium, for example, where he's wandering for 100 years.
Yes.
This
is biblical stuff.
Yeah, it's biblical. He wasn't actually wandering around on the ring for 100 years. It was more like he felt like he was in the simulation. Sorry, we got way off topic there.
Yeah.
But in any case, so
you guys
the Halo reigns were built at the Ark. The Great Forge, in that picture on the left there, you see the resource moon that's being disassembled. This is the one from Halo 3 being disassembled. We actually see the same Halo reign in Halo Wars 2, and one of the cool things was Blur showed it even smaller, basically showing that it's been stripped away to not only build another replacement Halo reign, but also to help prepare the Ark between the events of Halo 3, between the events of the novels, and then the events that you see in Halo Wars 2. The Ark is huge, and the Halo reigns are also huge, but not as huge as the Ark. It's almost mind-bogglingly massive, especially in terms of surface area.
It's not even talk about things like Trevelyan,
Shield worlds, and you get into actual Dyson spheres and stuff, which we try to avoid stuff like that because it just gets so absurdly out of scale. It's just as most people know, we have two kind of names for Halo reigns. We have the installation number, so installation 04. But then we also have a Greek letter that's assigned to every. And people for a long time.
Here's where you get to make people mad. I'm so excited.
So Alpha Halo, why is it installation 04? That was for a question for even I had. I was like, well, why does it make a whole lot of sense? Why is it installation 04? And it's also called Alpha Halo. So the reasoning behind that is the installation number is basically the sequence that it was manufactured, and the Greek letter is the actual firing order. So Alpha Halo fires first, and Beta Halo and Charlie Halo and Echo Halo, Foxtrot Halo, all the classical Greek letters.
All the classical Greek letters.
I know my history.
Indigo Halo.
Indigo Halo. So that's what the different orders mean. So Alpha Halo was the very first reign that fired. And some of that's conceit, actually, just because of the way the games were done. But if you ever wanted to know, that's why they have those two different separate terminologies. So we're going to talk now about the actual known rings. So
somebody said actually real quick, I thought Alpha Halo, Delta Halo, etc. was the order humanity discovered them, but that wouldn't even that wouldn't go in order even itself.
No, then like Zeta Halo.
Because you would have named, if it was order of discovery, you would have named that Beta Halo.
Yeah. Well, what makes that a little bit complicated is like if you see, I think I know where some of that's coming from, because in Halo Combat Evolved, if you look on the Pillar of Autumn's navigational display when you're talking to keys, they've already named the ring. It says Alpha Halo on the display, and you're like, wait. And it's also, I mean, Halo Combat Evolved is kind of funny because they encounter this massive alien artifact, and they're just like, oh, okay, moving on. We got to fight the Covenant. We're going to crash on it.
Yeah. There's
like,
actually
really
more. There's actually more like intrigue when they discover Delta Halo. When they pop out of slip space and they're like, WTF, mate? Like, what is this?
Whereas in Combat Evolved, they're like, meh, got other problems to worry about, like us getting hit by a million.
Land on the hula hoop.
And so the known Halo rings, the ones that we've actually, or I should say humans know about, is near 2558. So we have Alpha Halo, Halo Combat Evolved, Delta Halo from Halo 2, Gamma Halo, which is seen in the background of Halo 4, and then we see the surface of it in the Escalation comics. I know. People can see the pop-up messages. I don't think so.
Sorry, we're looking at the screen. If you see us looking down, we have on a big giant screen. We actually have the chat. So we're looking at the questions that that you're asking. Well, most of them.
Skype messages.
You're also
showing up here.
Like we're not dabbing. We're not.
And then so Gamma Halo is the one you see in the background in Halo 4 when you're on Ivanov Station. Zeta Halo, which we don't see, except we actually do see it on the cover of one of the novels.
Yes.
So
Fractures.
So that is Zeta Halo.
If you haven't checked out Fractures, by the way, it's super awesome. It's our latest anthology of short stories. A little plug for consumer products.
We get 10 cents every single time that book is sold.
James Smith.
And then Zeta Halo.
Gets his wings every time.
We briefly see kind of the surface of that, or not see it, but we hear about the surface of it a little bit.
Yeah.
In Hunters in the Dark, which is actually where it's introduced that humanity discovered it in, or actually put a facility on in the year 2555. Talking about timeline issues. So then we have what often has been called the replacement ring or Installation 04 Beta, or I've heard all sorts of different variations of it. That's the replacement ring that you see in Halo 3. That's replacing the destroyed Alpha Halo. And then we have the replacement ring that we see in Halo Wars 2, which we call, I think everybody calls even internally.
Sounds like a Keanu
Reeves ring.
Yeah.
So those are the Halo rings that we've visited in the novels or directly have landed on in the games.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have obviously the other Halo rings, which are elsewhere in the galaxy. And if you want to kind of know generally where they are in the galaxy, you can check out Halo Warfleet, where we have a galaxy map showing where
first time really roughly first time you have a rough kind of galaxy map.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that was a very rough thing to do, and even getting it nailed down to that. Like they're within this 8 billion light years. Even that getting nailed down was a kind of a pain. So those are the Halo rings that we've established that humanity knows about or knows where they are, or at least knew where they were at one point.
And somebody actually brings up a cool thing, Apex 7, so the raid on Apex 7. And canonically, the area, the environment of raid on Apex 7 is actually a simulation environment. It's an amalgamated simulation environment that the UNSC uses to train not just Spartans, but any personnel on Halo ring topography and also specific aspects of the anatomy of a Halo ring. So it's interesting, raid on Apex 7 actually has just certain cool elements of various spots on a Halo ring. So that's not a set on a specific ring, but it's just an amalgamation of certain types of landmarks that they can change. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about the nomenclature of the rings I see at CIA, and some other people are talking about the 04A, 04B, Installation 0809.
There is no B, no
And
no
at Warfleet, as far as I know, it's still available. I didn't buy every single copy of it, so it has to be somewhere out there. If it's selling for $1 million,
Ken's mom bought a third of them. Yeah,
that I can sell for $1 million. So Alpha Halo, it's also known as Installation 04. Sorry, getting back on topic again. I keep going on these wild tangents. So it's
weird.
Monitored because
Halo itself is talking in the chat and starting to
spout
some
little
nonsense.
Weird.
It's getting a little meta.
Yeah. So every Halo ring has a monitor assigned to it. The monitor that was assigned to Alpha Halo was 343 Guilty Spark. I'm not going to get into the nomenclature, but basically it's 7 to the power of the installation is the number of the monitor assigned there. Shocking, spoiler alert, it gets destroyed in Halo Combat Evolved. I know you didn't play to the end of the game. You just played until you got scared of the flood, and then you put the game down for 17 years. Oh yeah, spoiler alert, there's this creature called the Flood in there.
Oh, man.
So at the end, after the events of Halo Combat Evolved, the debris field is quarantined. In fact, there's even some maps that take place on map of bases.
Yeah, and we have Nightfall, which takes place
in a slip-spaced shard.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but
Nightfall is an interesting beast. So the debris field is quarantined because there's still flood floating around. In fact, that's the Mona Lisa and stuff like that. It kind of deals with some of that.
Super awesome. Mona Lisa, in case you're wondering, is a motion comic. Actually, it was originally included in Halo Evolutions, which was the first Halo short story anthology. But you can check them out. Just go on YouTube and find them. They're on YouTube. There's several motion comics that were done from Evolution stories, and the Mona Lisa is super awesome. It's pretty long. I think it's almost like an hour long or something like that. It's pretty hefty.
It's
I think.
one of the longer ones that are from that series of motion.
Also, there is a naked elite named Henry with a cricket bat. I mean, really, what more do you need?
I'm sold.
Like, done. Anyway,
so yeah, Alpha Shard. That's the shard from Halo Nightfall that they visit, and then the former Spartan Wolverines, and then blows up with the nuke. Delta Halo. So this is the reign that we visit in Halo 2 and Halo 2 Anniversary, installation 05. Its monitor, which we see very briefly in Halo 2, actually, is 2401 Penitent Tangent. Now, I should point out here that he has a red eye, and for a long time, people thought that meant they were rampant. That's actually, in the case of Forerunner Ancilla's, that's not actually the case. In fact, we see 2401 Penitent Tangent in the Halo 1 Anniversary terminal videos.
Does it mean he was angry, like Guilty Spark?
He could be angry, I don't know. But
I'd be angry.
It doesn't mean he's rampant. It's because every one of the monitors kind of have its own little color-coded eye to help differentiate.
And we see that in the terminals as well.
Yeah,
I think
when they have a little circle of monitors, the council of monitors meeting.
They're all meeting in a monitor focus room.
We deserve to be forgotten.
Yes,
perhaps,
they're unionizing.
Perhaps. Yeah, unionizing. Oh, that's. Yeah, I was make a joke there, but I shouldn't. So it suffered a flood outbreak. In fact, it suffered a flood outbreak sometime in the distant past. We're not actually saying when it happened. There's some clues in various media about when it could have occurred. It's partially glassed, so after the events of Halo 2, obviously they have the big civil war, the Great Schism that occurs basically right above it. The Gravemind takes High Charity and slips space away or runs away, and then the elite fleets that are there basically glass as much as they could of the flood-infested areas of Delta Halo, and then it's basically quarantined. That entire system is quarantined. After the events of Halo 2 Anniversary. So in the post-war period, the UNSC and San Helio are both basically keeping an eye on that system. They're not supposed to do anything in that system because it's just too dangerous. There could be, again, flood are still around, and there's also all sorts of other dangerous sentinels and stuff like that could be there. And the status of Penitent Tangent is, I was going to say something, but no, he is, right now it's unknown what happened to Penitent Tangent. Last we see of him is in the clutches of Gravemind on Delta Halo, but we don't actually see him on High Charity, but he hasn't shown up in any stories yet.
Nope.
But
always a lot of cool threads just to maybe visit later.
So, but as part of like the monitoring effort, there is a station called Lisbon Station that was established here. This was mentioned in some other kind of deep lore sources, and we haven't gotten any detail about what Lisbon Station is, or if it's like Ivanov, or if it's small, or if it's an Oni station. We haven't gotten any details on it. Gamma Halo is the ring that you see in the background of Ivanov Station in the Halo 4, and then you see the surface of it in Escalation, like I mentioned. So its monitor is
that's a cool
Abject
scene.
Testament.
Actually, when you pop out of slip space, I think it's when you're riding on the Lich.
Yes.
Right. You pop out at
and then
Gamma.
You crash.
Yeah, and crash like you do.
And I'm trying to remember the name of the planet. Dovin, I think, is the name of or is that the other? I can't remember if that was the name of the planet, the Shattered Planet.
Yeah.
It had a whole story actually about the Shattered Planet.
Yeah.
But we're probably never going to publish it because it's one of those things where if you published it, then it'd get locked in, and it's like,
I know.
We could maybe do something. But there's a whole story about why that planet is shattered. There was all sorts of stuff that was written in Halo 4 that got left on the cutting room floor about that particular area. And then Ivanov Station, which we actually fight and play around in Halo 4. And then, unfortunately, everybody on the spoiler alert, everybody on the station is effectively killed in the events of Halo 4.
We're just ruining all the stories
Oh yeah,
for everyone.
There's a time limit of spoilers.
That's
like
some
8
sort of
million
statute of
years.
limitations.
Yeah. So everybody is composed on the station, every living being except for Master Chief. The Oni does send a team back to the station to recover as much as they can off of it, and it's mentioned in some other sources. I think Warfleet mentions it a little bit, but right now it's not the rain's gone now. It's one issue. So Gamma Halo in Events of Escalation in the next 72-hour story arc. I'm not going to go over the entire events of that story arc, but basically the Master Chief returns to Gamma Halo because that's where the Didact reappears after the events of Halo 4 when he falls into the Composer's Abyss.
Yep.
He basically pops out on Gamma Halo. Yeah. Shenanigans happen, and then Gamma Halo is actually teleported away by a new monitor.
Yep.
Because Abject Testament is still MIA at this time. And so a new monitor basically takes it for repairs, and that's the last we've seen of it so far.
It was Static Caroline?
Static Caroline, yeah. Which is not a normal Ring monitor. It's actually a monitor or a different installation.
Yeah.
So then we have the replacement Ring. This is like the scene we mentioned earlier of the Ring rising out of the mist and the forge on the Ark.
Such a great scene.
So it's what we call Installation 08. Now we tend to not call it like 04B, 04C. We're just basically calling them an installation order. That's partly just to keep the confusion down. Because then people are like, is
installation
it 04C?
Order makes way more sense.
Yeah, so we're just keeping them all installation. The order of manufacture, the order of use in the array. So it started manufacture immediately after Alpha Halo got destroyed. Potentially, it already actually somewhat been partially constructed. This is
and it would technically be an Alpha Halo.
Yes, it's a replacement. It's supposed to be identical to Alpha Halo in every way, which is why when you visit the surface of it in Halo 3, that the control room is basically an unfinished version of the control room from Halo 1.
I think in some ways it's like the installation number is kind of like a VIN number. Like you can have two of the same vehicle, and it could be you have another vehicle that is designed to be the exact copy or duplicate of another one, but it's going to have like a different serial number, 1 of 10.
And here I'll point out that it wouldn't be identical like in every, if let's say they had gotten completed, it wouldn't be identical in every physical characteristic because 343 Guilty Spark had actually done a bunch of modifications and changes.
Everybody's voting on which one it should be. I think my favorite one is 08B.
Yeah. Well, we're all calling it Installation 08 internally.
That's true.
So
you can call it 04B.
You can call it whatever you want. You can have
you can
AKAs,
call it Steve, but it's still wrong.
You can have aliases. So it got destroyed. So this seems to be a theme. Every time Master Chief lands or even sees a Halo Ring, it's going to get blown up in some way. So he actually detonates Installation 08 prematurely over the Ark to kill or stop the flood and stop Grave Mine, which significantly damages the Ark. And that thread is picked up on.
His canon name is now Steve.
Yeah.
We'll have to update our internal documents to reflect.
And so in the events of Halo Wars 2, we have the replacement ring appears, and that's what we call Anders' ring. We're putting that in quotes. That's Installation 09. So that's the one that Professor Ellen Anders situates herself on. They eject the entire hull plate of the ring to get rid of a bunch of banished on the hull plate, which is a really cool scene from Halo Wars 2. And funnily enough, that scene is actually from an event that you see in the terminal videos for Halo 1 Anniversary, where you see Guilty Spark start going a little crazy, and he
where he just starts testing things.
Just testing. He just ejects a section of the Halo Ring just for giggles.
Let's see what this does.
And so that's actually where that idea came from, and then Blur did a really cool job of showing them taking the entire section and shooting it into space and killing all the brutes that were on it. And that's the one that you see escaping, or not really escaping, but it's actually being transported back to its firing position in the Halo array. Because it's actually fairly close to Earth, and so if you watch Halo Wars 2, you can see why they're trying to do it. They're trying to get word, trying to find out what's happening back on Earth and get the word back that they're still alive.
Yep.
And then it's pulled out of subspace,
pulled over by the police,
pulled over by the cops, the Peacemaker, the Guardian, and then that's the stinger at the end of Halo Wars 2 is that you see the Guardian over Anders' ring. Dun dun dun, and then that's the last we see of that so far. And then Zeta Halo, this is from the cover, Fractures. Installation 07, we also call it the Rogue Halo because the whole backstory that goes into Zeta Halo. We can do an entire presentation on Zeta Halo. All the crazy stuff that occurs on Zeta Halo and its entire history.
Yeah, its history is really the big the big thing, and it's interesting. And I think they actually notate even a little bit in Hunters in the Dark, that like
It's different.
It is different. Like it's things that you're expecting to find in certain places aren't necessarily in certain places. But again, a lot of that is because of its history. It was, one of the Senescent array that used to be 30,000 kilometers long and is now being, reformed into a 10,000 kilometer, sorry, not long, wide ring. And so in that transformation, which by the way is actually one of the coolest parts in the Forerunner trilogy too, that whole
With the
passing through the
wolf-faced
wolf
moon.
moon and everything, like super cool. But yeah, its history alone makes Zeta Halo just a really interesting prospect for the overall universe, and just like wow, like what is different about this.
There's a lot of Greg Bearisms. If you read Primordium, it's a lot of really interesting descriptions of like the way the superstructure works and the battle damage the ring had suffered, and basically people, plasma lances that burned all the way down to the superstructure and below, and so people are looking out down through like a hole in the Halo ring that literally goes kilometers deep, and it's filled with wreckage. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in the Primordium novel about the ring itself.
Everything is gigantic
The Palace
scale
of Pain.
for Bear, yeah.
Oh yeah, you have the cartographer is like 50 or 500 kilometers wide at the base. It's absolutely
insane.
massive. So it's unique. Again, we could go an entire presentation on just Zeta Hilo, but humans have visited it. They actually have facilities on it, and we know that from the books. But it's a unique beast even within the Halo rings. And then there's 3 more Halo rings that we don't know anything about. We've never seen them outside of Halo 3, the diagnostic displays that are inside of the Arc control room.
Somebody actually, real quick before we go on, asked, "Hey Grim, what about the Halo 1 Force spoke of and seen in Halo Bloodline?" That was actually not a Halo, so that's a line installation. So that's a specific, just like again you have like the Halo rings, and you also have Shield Worlds. Like line installations are different installations.
And you see another one of those in Halo 4. It's one of the multiplayer.
Yeah, it's one of the multiplayer maps.
With the gravel generators out in the water.
Yep.
And we can't talk about the ring that you see at the end of Halo 5 Guardians, unfortunately. Maybe later.
True.
So we have these 3 rings, other than the location that we see generally on the Warfleet map, and then what we see of their surface in Halo 3 itself, which we should point out, as we established, like, particularly with Zeta Halo and some of the other rings, that what the images you see in Halo 3, that's like an outdated, because the ring have actually had very good diagnostic updates.
It's like an information cache, basically, of essentially its last check-in.
Yeah.
So.
Because the monitors are derelict in their duties, so they haven't been sending status updates for tens of thousands of years by that
They're
point.
not answering emails.
Not answering emails.
Showing up late for meetings.
This is what 343 Spark is complaining about in Halo 1 Anniversary. He's like, hey, I've been showing up in the message room for now every year for hundreds of years.
I've been in the war room.
For 3,000 years, they've been apparently suffering from some sort of malfunction. So let's talk a little bit about some of the nitty-gritty details about Halo. It's particularly so Halo consists of an exterior band. That's the actual, the completely artificial outer surface of the ring. We have an interior surface that's the actual livable area of the band, which, and I like how Greg Bear describes it, it's basically just painted on. It's a very super thin layer of life over basically a giant weapon. And then you have ambient wildlife that's been seeded on that ring for various purposes. You have Forerunner structures which stick out of the ring. Those are actually, basically the ring is kind of printed around these structures. You have the entire underground area, which we've barely even talked about or seen. And then we have all the automation that goes into the Halo ring, primarily including the Sentinels. So the exterior band, this is again the completely artificial section. This is from Blur, because Blur does amazing work. But
Blur actually goes and visits these places.
We have like the pulse generators. You have actually on that outer surface of the ring is a weapons array itself. It has a defensive weapons array, which we briefly see a very a confidence class weapon array that actually surrounds these Halo rings, which we never actually see in use for various reasons. But we briefly see it in Halo 1 Anniversary Terminal when Guilty Spark is monitoring the approaching ships, and he activates the defensive array of the ring. You actually see very briefly that there's actually little weapon satellites.
We've actually talked about some of the elements on there also being individual slip space drives, because it's how it's part of the emergency slip space.
Well, not just emergency, you can just, like you see in...
Well, exactly, that's true. But each individual one, they can work individually, because that's actually how Alpha Shard ends up getting kicked out, is that section
it has
of
a shunt.
But
But they can
initiate.
They can move. I mean, the rings they're not just an immobile like base. They're actually effectively large spacecraft. They actually can have solid space drive capabilities of their own. In fact, they have an easier time getting around now than they did back during the Forerunner times, because reconciliation debt had built up in the galaxy. It was very difficult to move these rings. That's one reason why they were made smaller from the 30,000 kilometer range, was so they could actually move them easier. But generally, once they have a firing point that's been pre-selected around the galaxy, the Forerunners picked out 7 good spots, and then they place the rings there, and that's like, it also has the gas giants or some other gravity anchor that they can be around. Anyways, but yeah, so the outer surface is the purely mechanical aspect of the ring, which we haven't really shown that too closely or talked about too much, but that's massive. That's a pretty big chunk of metal that's on the outskirts there. The interior is the actual terraformed, 3D, I guess you call it 3D printed.
Basically.
Yeah. Terraformed interiors. We're actually in the Halo 3 art book.
Terraforged, maybe.
Halo 3 art book. You actually see the stages of it basically printing the land on top of the ring, and it's also mentioned in the
Well, I mean, in some ways, you can kind of see elements of that even in the final run, the Warthog run in Halo 3.
Yeah, with the under
yeah,
the
in
plates.
fact, you have there's one specific section, and a few people have noted this, I've seen in forums and online, that there's actually, you drive through that kind of really iconic stone archway from Halo 1's Halo Combat Evolved Silent Cartographer level. So it's actually, still in mid-process of essentially painting, and forging that new environment over the lattice work of the understructure for that specific Halo ring for installation 08.
Yeah, and there are nanomachines in particular with the Forerunners, but we don't get too much involved in the nanomachine sun aspect of Halo. Yeah, but so those landscapes can be terraformed, and even specific sections of the ring can be actually, their atmospheric conditions can be altered, also their gravity. I mean, this has come up before. The ring doesn't need to rotate to generate gravity. It doesn't need to. It has artificial gravity generators. The ring could just sit there completely immobile. It spins for various other reasons. So, yeah, and it also, just like the Ark, as we talked about actually in the secondary materials for Halo Wars 2, that the different refugia can have different atmospheric conditions and different...
In the Phoenix logs.
Different gravity, different atmospheric conditions, different lighting conditions, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, everything is very modular.
Yeah, it's very modular and very reconfigurable. And that's to support various types of wildlife. So we have a few critters that now it's become almost kind of an in thing to show, like the quadwing, for example.
Yeah.
It's shown up on all sorts of different Halo ring environments, and it's made out of some sort of C4, because you shoot it once and it just explodes.
That's what it eats. It eats C4.
It eats C4. That's its natural diet is C4. So this is has these naturally occurring wildlife. Halo 1 was actually going to have much more wildlife. You see some of the early screenshots with the dinosaur creatures.
Big dinosaurs.
When blind wolves were still
there.
there.
Yeah,
You could
blind
ride
wolves
on 'em.
and Kentrosaurus-looking critters. And
that for technical limitations, they got rid of them. And so then there's some notes about the flora
blind
and
wolves
fauna.
came back, though. Actually, we talked about Zeta Halo being in Hunters in the Dark. Actually, the cover of Hunters in the Dark features some blind wolves as they go back to the Ark, Jurassic Ark, as we like to.
Yeah, and the concept,
there's
base
no
concept is from
shortage
Halo 1.
of critters in that book.
Yeah.
Running around.
So this is just one example of a critter. From the Halo rings that most people know about because it showed up in multiple Halo games. And then we have obviously those iconic Halo structures. And what's really cool about Halo and on the rings in particular is that these structures are often built around natural environments, or they kind of seem embedded within these natural environments because the terrain is printed on top of them. And this is the cartographer facility.
Yeah, those substructures and actually came first.
Yeah, they're just little bits of machinery poking out of the surface, little pinpricks of Forerunner mechanisms. And then there's the underground sections of it, which is basically, if you've ever seen the original Halo Wars when they're going through the shield world, these massive voids. There's no gravity, there's no atmosphere. It's just basically places for fuel, for energy, for sentinels, for all that sort of stuff is done in these areas underneath
Halo
the
Wars
ring.
2, actually in Halo Wars, and that's going more through the the interior and the crust of the shield world. But Halo Wars 2 also shows some really similar interesting structures
like when you see
that.
the glassing.
Yeah, you just see, or even just when you're playing in natural gameplay. One of the really neat things in talking to the art director for Halo Wars 2, Jeremy Cook, one of the things that they really wanted to do, and part of this because it's an RTS, is to give a sense of scale and depth. You have these areas where these these chasms that are and valleys and canyons that are just going that almost seem endless. And it gives a really cool sense of scale and depth to the structure. And obviously, the arc is even much more massive than a Halo ring. But those are some really cool. Like one of my favorite little parts in Snowbound, the Halo 3 map, is there's some spots where you can
look
kinda
out and you can
sneak
see
down and look, and it's just like this huge. You're like, oh, this planet is not a natural formation.
Yeah.
Like
That's especially, it's kind of lost now, but if you remember how Halo Combat Evolved was back in 2001 when you first played it, like when you first activate the energy bridge,
yeah.
the hard light bridge, like that scene, that set piece area was massive at the time.
Or the
for a
stone
game
kicking.
environment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a tiny little fridge now, but back in the day, that was an absolutely massive environment to show in a game, just as part of a level. It was bigger than some games' entire levels, just that one scene area. So we haven't really talked about too much or seen much of these underground areas, but that's where a lot of the actual the hard work of a Halo ring occurs, is underneath the surface, that thin veneer, that thin paint of life on top of this machinery. And then we have obviously the automation. So we have all the various types of sentinels. Normally when we talk about sentinel, we mean aggressor sentinels. It's the most common that we see in the games. It's as an antagonist or as a helper, depending on the game, or sometimes both in the same game. And then obviously the iconic monitors, such as 343 Guilty Spark, and even the Forge monitors. They're that very iconic basketball with eye type of shape. So, and then there's obviously the constructor sentinels. There's the the various types of strato sentinels. The retrievers that we see, or at least one version of retriever that we see in Halo Wars 2. All sorts of little robot buddies that are flying around doing all sorts of stuff on the ring for all sorts of purposes.
So somebody, I know a couple people, Toa Freak specifically, has been asking, and we talked, I know, a little bit about it, I think, at the PAX talk, but the relationship between the composer and the Halo rings themselves, that there is a kind of coordination between that. We actually haven't gone into it very much, but yes, there is a relationship. The composers are part of kind of like the anatomy of Halo. So
I'm hesitant to say anything because I don't know exactly what you.
I know. It's like I said, we haven't talked much about it. We talked a little bit about it, like at the other seminar. But yes, there is a relationship between the composer and those elements.
Oh yeah, and it's like the safeguard sentinels and stuff.
Yes.
From Halo 5. Yeah. Some we haven't actually visualized yet, or that we're visualizing just didn't end up in the that's how game design works. So the function of Halo. So not only is it a weapon, but it has the habitat that's on the structure. So I'm quickly moving on.
I like people are like, oh, that's a low effort answer. No, it's a very deliberate answer.
So we have the fortress world. It serves basically as a backup fortress. It's its own weapon installations. Has millions of sentinels on it that can be used as a weapon, even though they're not really intended to be used as a frontline combatant. In fact, it has a terrible idea, and they try to avoid that.
Forerunners are really actually full of terrible ideas.
Yeah, Foreigners have a lot of terrible ideas.
As grand as their good ideas are, equally grand their bad ideas.
When they fail big.
Right?
Probably their worst failing was that they actually set up flood research installations on, as far as we know now, every Halo ring has at least some sort of flood research.
Everywhere. Every Forerunner carries flood in their backpack, I'm convinced.
They're all over the place.
Spent a long time fighting these guys. You really went through a lot of trouble to keep a bunch of them alive.
Now, some of them that were originally on Zeta Halo, they had thousands of flood research installations on them. The one that was on Delta Halo was at least one large one. And then there was the one that was on Alpha Halo, which seemed to be like a pretty small laboratory type of complex. In the greater scheme of things. And then they had some that are off-site. Like, for example, Alpha Halo had the whole gas mine complex.
Is there a designation we have for gold sentinels? I'm trying to remember if we have any internal designation. I don't think we have a separate. It's just
no, we don't have it.
Extra bad.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and sometimes it's just now there's a different type of aggressor. It's like the weird ones, like the aggressors that are armed with needlers. Like the needler armed aggressor in Halo Combat Evolved.
Yeah.
That was actually a leftover from testing that got just left there. Whoops, forgot to get rid of it. At least as far as I understand, that was the reason why it was in there. It's just a remnant. And then the purpose of the Halo rings was the most well known, which is that it's a weapon. So it's a little hard to see here on this picture, but So these are some hard dimensions and numbers. I think some of this might be the first time we've seen some of these, or at least people have actually like, no, this is really what it is. So it has 318 kilometers wide, 47 kilometers in depth, 10,000 kilometers diameter. Everybody knows that part. 31,000 kilometers in circumference, and it has almost 10 million square kilometers of interior surface area, which is about
There's a lot of
Canada.
people that are just now kind of thinking about the overall scale and structure.
Yeah, so like that picture here, we see
It's real big.
the little dot there is the 5.6 kilometer long Infinity.
Yeah.
And then there's area around Mount Rainier. So
Yeah,
from
Infinity,
Seattle,
that
we
gives
have to
you,
have
we're
Mount Rainier.
using the Infinities for scale. Obviously, it's one of the newer,
It's our
newer
banana for
ships.
scale.
Yeah, it is. That's true. It's a large banana, it is. But it shows you it's a huge, massive ship. Really anything else would just be a blip. So the best we've got, and then Mount Rainier or something that's, close to home, but, something that is given scale. Big mountain, big volcano.
Yeah. And this is actually tiny compared to Larry Niven's Ring World. The Larry Niven Ring Worlds make this look like a little tiny little toy. They're absolutely massive. So, but it has like the interior surface area of Canada. Obviously, most of the Halo ring is actually just like our Earth.
Yeah.
Most of it's water, some sort of oceans or seas. But there is quite a lot of land mass on that ring. So we're also going to talk about how you activate Halo. This is kind of like how do you end things with a Halo ring? Well, you got to activate it, and there's basically 4 steps. So first, you got to find the map room. So you got to find the cartographer. Though technically you wouldn't need to do this, but this is the easiest way.
Yeah.
Though it never really explained how they found the cartographer. Really, I guess the Covenant already knew where to look for him in Halo Combat Evolved.
Yeah.
Which is a little odd, a little bit of a plot hole.
Oops.
Terrible.
Gosh.
So, but you find the
never gonna
cartographer
make
the easiest way. That'll lead you to the control room. But when you get to the control room, well, you can't actually do anything there. You got to go find the actual.
Moses Christ, stop. Don't tell people how to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. It's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. We're
I
terrible
feel
people.
fine.
Most people will not even get that reference anymore. That's like classic music now.
I'm so sorry.
So you got to locate the index. So you got to locate the key to actually fire the Halo, which is the little green popsicle stick in the library. So you got to follow for the Guilty Spark through a bazillion doors, through basically the same 2 hallways for an hour with a shotgun.
There's no elevator in this thing?
Yeah, I know. I totally love this level. It's the best level in Halo Combat Evolved. I adore it.
Which level? The brown one?
The level with doors and elevators. So after you get the popsicle, you take it back to the control room, and then you can actually activate the Halo array, assuming a giant green lady doesn't pop up and says, "Oh, it's your chum, is he?" And
He's your chum, your pal?
Your pal, your buddy, old friend.
Don't make her angry.
Yeah, turns green. That's not good.
I feel like she'd be really dangerous if she ever turned against us.
Oh yeah,
That never
that's a
happened.
good plot point.
That never happened.
Let me write that one down
Yeah.
for future use. So then you can use it, and then you run, which is basically what you do in Halo 3 when you actually do the entire firing sequence and don't try to stop it. And now we're actually going to open up some questions and answers. So we went off on all sorts of weird little tangents here.
This thing took as long as it did because we answered questions along the way anyway. But yeah, if you've got some questions, most of them we won't answer.
So can the Halo array energy be tuned to affect other things? No. And that's partly by design because they basically didn't want the flood to basically, hey, we're going to capture Halo Rain and then turn it to be used against Forerunners. Potentially it could, but we're
as its current use.
It's pretty indiscriminate. That's one reason why the Forerunners didn't want to use it is that they really couldn't. If they could have just built it to fight the flood, they would have tuned it to just fight the flood and kill flood supercells. But it has to be a pretty indiscriminate weapon. It's less indiscriminate than the original Halo arrays. The original Halo arrays killed pretty much all life, whereas the more current Halo arrays only affected higher order life. So it left insects, so it didn't completely collapse planetary ecosystems, whereas the original Halo rings explicitly collapsed planetary ecosystems because it killed even all the insects.
See a lot of questions about who built the zone structures on Installation 05. It's not really something we are talking about today, and in all honesty, that is not remotely the last or most mysterious thing that I'm sure we'll encounter on Forerunner installations of all various types.
Yeah. The Z designations for Forerunners, the Forerunner constructs, that's from the visual guide. So that's the human the Zeta.
Yeah.
designations for the UNSC designations for these robots. So yeah, they would have their own UNSC/CIA or CIA ONI designations.
Look at that. You're canon, CIA.
Yeah.
Now you
I
are.
meant the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. We actually have names for all the monitors for every Halo ring.
Jim?
Those are ones we're not
Pam?
revealing.
Michael? Dwight?
In fact, that was one of the things we had to scrub out of this was the other monitor names. How did the Ark survive Halo 3? That's primarily covered in Hunters in the Dark. Can creatures survive on the Halo ring when the Halo ring fires? Generally, no, they don't. They'd have to be reintroduced. Some of that is actually talked about in basically the Refugia discussions in Halo Wars 2.
Yeah.
A lot of those, the plants and animals that would be killed by a Halo array, they could be reconstructed using genetic samples that are located on the ring itself. They just basically clone new critters. But yeah, pretty much anything that would be affected by a Halo array is not shielded by being on a Halo ring.
Which monitor is on Steve? That's a rather personal question, Deltaverse.
That's a weird question.
Gosh. Why would you say that?
The light bulb, Installation 09 have its own monitor. It would have been assigned to its own monitor if it. Well, that's actually a good question. Of whether it would have its own monitor.
Which one?
Installation 09 Anders ring.
Oh,
The forums would have assigned a monitor to it.
yes. Which really is actually an interesting question as far as
Arc
what
AI
the
would have
what
done
the
that.
pipeline, the production pipeline of that is. Yeah, because
Yes,
one would
Solitude-
imagine that you would actually
Solitude would have done that,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, Solitude has ceased to be. Has joined the Choir Invisible. That's the events of again going back to the novels, unfortunately. But yeah, the Ark would have assigned a new monitor to fulfill that.
And
duty.
also, there's some
but the rings
tragic
don't need a
Solitude
monitor to
stuff.
function.
There's some tragic Solitude stuff in the Phoenix logs actually of Halo Wars 2.
Yeah, but yeah, you don't need you actually don't need a monitor to actually fire a Halo ring. That's why all like Gamma Halo and even Delta Halo were primed and ready to fire in the events of Halo 2. That kind of stuff, you don't need a monitor. Monitor is there to kind of do like housekeeping, and particularly to keep stuff alive on the ring. But the actual weapon function, you don't need to have a monitor actually do that. Where's Forge World located? Most of the Forge World stuff, again, that's in simulation territory.
Yeah, I don't think I'm trying to remember if we had established.
Are the other monitors
Specific.
composed mines like 343 Guilty Spark is 343? That's again in the novels, Chakas. We're not ready to talk about. The
Grim,
other
didn't you
monitors.
say S3s are replacing S4s on Twitter yesterday? Nope, you are a dirty liar. I did not say that. S3s are actually integrated into the overall Spartan branch and Spartan 4 like program. It doesn't mean that they specifically are like Spartan 4s because that's more of an, introduction class and generation. But the any remaining Spartan 3s would be introduced into the new Spartan branch. And we see that with whether or not it's from a combat standpoint or not, because we see June, for example, who is he's actually taking a break from Spartan branch to appear on our live stream. He just sits there really quietly.
Monitors can make all sorts of changes to the Halo ring, as we see in the Halo 1 Anniversary Terminal videos with you for Guilty Spark doing experiments on the ring, or as we even see in Halo Wars 2, where you can inject entire sections of the ring plating off, and then they can rebuild over time. Basically, the monitors, as long as they don't interfere with the primary functions of the ring, which is to fire a Halo array effect, they can kind of do whatever landscaping that they want on the Halo ring it's within their purview.
I also see, does that mean, I'm assuming that you're meaning this in regards to the Spartan 3, does that mean SPI armor is dead? No, definitely not. SPI armor could still be employed. It would just be mission specific. It's also something important to remember too. A lot of times, and from a branding perspective, we do this as well. We associate characters and individuals with like specific types of armor sometimes. But again, largely some of that is just from a universe building and a branding and an outside the game type stuff. But there is zero reason really why any Spartan or non-augmented specialists and stuff couldn't wear or wouldn't wear mission specific equipment for various operations, and again, whether that be Spartans or not. So any kind of equipment, armor, various types of Mjolnirs, if you're a Spartan or other thing, you can.
The Halo Forge monitor doesn't have a name. Doesn't have a specific name for it.
The Halo Which one?
The Forge monitors.
I don't think we have a specific name, at least not public. We may have one on the back end.
There was a time when they're going to have a little more character to the Forge monitors. Like you could kind of customize them. Some looked really cool, like a lot of like filigree and stuff on them. But for game production reasons, they just kind of went with the simpler ones. Can they change their shells? Like I just mentioned, they actually could. Most of them don't bother or don't care, but they are bound to that little shell. It's a security mechanism. They're kind of bound to that. They can't just like download themselves into any body that they want as a security precaution. Can you use an activation index of one Halo ring on another? Nope. But you can use the index that's keyed to one ring on its replacement. That's the whole shtick of Halo 3.
Yeah.
Cortana, she's a thief, and she keeps what she steals. She has the activation index from Alpha Halo that she stole in Halo Combat Evolved, or she borrowed in Halo Combat Evolved, and then she used that to activate the replacement Halo ring.
Because it was basically a history of deviance, actually.
She's a I'm doing a lot of.
Everybody's like, wow, why would she ever turn bad? I mean, man,
she's a perverse instantiation.
Yes, drinking that Klepto-Bismol, stealing stuff from the Forerunners. Jeez.
Sorry.
Just walk into somebody's house.
So can like the Guardians disable a ring? Nope. They're cops, but they're not that level of cop. So they can like pull over a car, but they can't like just blow up a Halo ring or stop it from functioning.
What was it, Guardians?
The Guardians. Oh, yeah, they're fairly limited on what a Guardian can actually
give you a really sternly worded.
Yeah, they can give you a warning. They're going to report you to Overwatch.
They just disable you.
And like stuff about the Ark. There's some stuff that was in Halo Wars that's in the secondary materials for Halo Wars 2 regarding the fleet that actually went to the Ark with the Enduring Conviction. Some of that's talked about a little bit in the secondary material. Some of those ships are actually out at other installations that are near the Ark. So there's the Ark, and then there's also other facilities that are near the Ark that we don't see. And some of the ships were out doing that, and some of it was just literally, I hate to say it, but kind of a cost function of how many ships we could show in cutscenes and stuff like that. So, it wasn't the only ship that was there. One Guardian said, "Well, the Earth is not the Ark." Cortana letters, those are really cool. Cortana letters are cool. They're quasi-canonical. Could a ring use the space portal defensively? Actually, yeah. So that's actually in the Primordium novels. Again, I highly recommend you read those Greg Bear novels because there's all sorts of crazy stuff that occurs in those novels. And part of that, he, as typical in the Greg Bear,
in and out.
He just mentions offhand that you can lock parts of the Halo ring in a space basically bubble that can makes it completely impervious to harm. You can't affect. It's basically like rotated slightly outside of reality. So it's completely impervious, but it takes a lot of power.
It's like phasing out.
Yeah, kind of. Well, but apparently you can still see it. It's kind of weird, but basically, you can use subspace. It's a subspace shielding type of system, which is a really cool idea.
Hold X to flip Halo ring is literally the plot of Primordium.
Actually,
it should have gone on the back of the book.
That's actually pretty darn close.
Now that I think about it.
Why doesn't Lasky mention Zeta Halo? Not sure. He doesn't really say. They don't really talk a whole lot. They almost.
I also
forget
a lot of that too.
I was
going to say a lot of that is just kind of standard, in conversation, like where you don't necessarily really like, oh, he left out. It would be like if you're naming a group of friends we're going to the movies, but you forget to name one or two of the friends. It doesn't mean that they're not.
But that's actually a good thing because
whatever. But
mentioning that, so in the events of Halo 4, when you meet up with the Infinity, they very briefly tell you why they're out there, and one of the things they tell you very briefly is that, we're out deactivating Halo rings.
Yep.
But it happened so quickly, and I never mentioned it again.
Wait, what?
We've had people in here in the studio so wait, why were they at Requiem? Like, how did they even find this place? I'm like, well, they tell you in the game. It's in a cutscene. Like, oh, well, it just happens so quickly, or people skip it. Let's see. Cortana letters. No, we're not going to use it. Cortana letters are not used to justify anything. They're just cool additional material. Can Jerome insert an AI chip? No, so no, with the upgraded armor that he basically gets in Halo Wars 2, he could, but not with the original Mark IV, because that was an innovation for the Mark V.
Yeah, that was one of the things that kind of specifically set the Mark V apart, which was more of that full integration suite for specifically actually for a smart AI.
Yeah. Who was Docker? Dr. Halsey talking to at the beginning of Halo 4.
Not telling you.
I actually was gonna say that, and I got shot down on saying who that was.
Yep. Why is Seeker a thing?
I don't know. Destin Echo is my favorite character. Somebody asked way early on, like, what was our favorite Halo Legendary campaign? Because we're talking about like Legendary, and
Oh yeah.
because that ties with terminal videos. Because some of the Halo 3 terminal videos you can
Yes,
only
you can only see on Legendary.
on Legendary.
Yep.
Halo 2 is my favorite Halo game, and that includes on Legendary. In terms of like additional reason to play Legendary, I'd say Halo 3 because of like the terminal videos and stuff. But Spock the Cat's still alive. Oh man, Corinne would kill me if I talked about Spock the Cat. I pushed for Spock the Cat to be in Halo Wars 2 in like every cutscene.
He literally every cutscene.
It would have been Spock the Cat
Riding
Wars.
on Jerome, give Spock the Cat Mjolnir.
It would just basically hear people talking. It actually would save money because you could have Spock the Cat just like sitting on a control terminal, and then the characters are talking in the background.
Yeah, that's true.
And then
like
save
the
all that
whole
money.
game is actually told from Spock the Cat's perspective. Spock the Cat should have been a leader.
Oh,
So
maybe
many
we can still do that.
opportunities missed.
See,
This is why
we're
they
gonna bring
don't
that.
let us.
We're going to take that
design
idea to top men. Top
top
men
men and top women.
Exactly.
Top
And then
cats.
that potentially, I mean, we had the yap. The
We had the yap. Yeah, we had the takeover.
we had the
yappening.
takeover, the yappening.
It's true. We can have the
so-
Spockening.
Oh,
It writes itself.
I will do all the concept art for Spock the Cat. I'll drag up some of the Halo Wars concepts with
true.
Spock the Cat.
It's true. Might as well.
And we will make that happen. So you guys, you saw DLC being made right here. Grim likes number. Why was the flood stored on the range? That's explained actually in Halo Combat Evolved. They were hoping that over 100,000 years or however long it took, that they would be able to find a cure for the flood, or a way to stop the flood, or a way to slow it down. And it turned out that even after 100,000 years, they still were no closer to finding an answer to the flood contagion. But the monitors were told to do that, so they did it.
Is the yappening canon?
No.
It's a squishy canon thing.
Yeah. Spock versus Yap
Fourth
Yap,
wall
that'd be cool.
canon.
Some of the stuff is getting a little far afield, like the heavy Corvettes.
This
design
is how we
pattern.
know it's time to wind the stream down. Is when we
Can you
get-
dual wield Halo Reigns? Yeah, actually, you could quad wield Halo Reigns.
It's true.
You could do all sorts of crazy stuff with them. Halo Reigns have blacker colored undersuits. I actually like the camo covered camo undersuits.
Yeah, that's true.
With kind of the digital camo pattern.
That's cool stuff.
If an activation is destroyed, is it impossible to light the ring? That's actually a really good question. I could give an answer, but I don't want it to be like a canon.
That's true.
Like,
No, because we give an answer, then you guys would quote it in forums and
Yeah,
stuff, and
it'd
then game team will change it, and we'll get blamed, and then they'll never let us do Spock
yeah,
the Cat
because
as a leader.
the game team would want to have Spock the Cat be the
Yeah.
activation index.
So
it turns
if
out
we
he
answer
has
this question,
the genetic
you'll
pattern.
never get Spock the Cat. So
He has the right Geass
true.
to do it. Like the librarian specifically chose Spock the Cat. It was his time in history to rise to become.
That's true.
Because the librarian saw that the Spock the Cat would be needed in a future
The
time.
librarian is actually 8 of his 9 lives, all in one. All right. I'm just gonna.
Where did-
any more?
Monitor 049 didn't take Gamma Halo anyways. That was a different monitor that took Gamma Halo away.
I expect a 6-issue comic series on this next week. Awesome. Well, you know what? In
Yeah.
all honesty, speaking of comic series, we want to wrap this up, but we do have a little bit of housekeeping, actually. Comic series, we actually recently announced Halo Collateral Damage, Master Chief Story comic series. It's actually a 3-part comic miniseries. We also recently announced, speaking of Master Chief Stories, Halo Silent Storm. We will have more details on those in the near-ish future. It will be maybe sooner than you think, and not as soon as you want. But we also have we also recently announced, we actually kind of gave a more full view of Halo Bad Blood, which is a new novel by Matt Forbeck. I always want to call him Forbuck, literally, because he is like the voice of Buck. Matt Forbeck, who wrote actually Halo New Blood, which was a novel about Buck and Alpha 9. And Bad Blood is actually the continuation of that, and it is really, really cool. And it actually is one of the first kind of stories that takes place post Halo 5 campaign. Technically, Halo Wars 2 campaign also takes place post Halo
Well,
5.
there's also
but
the
that's more
story
of a,
that's in Fractures.
Yes, and it is linked with the
Fox
story. Yes, in Fractures as well. So look for Halo Bad Blood, and then we also have something that was not announced, but it got out there a little bit, and that is a very special Spartan for like a field guide, and you are actually leaving tomorrow morning to go to a convention where I think you may end up speaking a little bit.
Yeah,
about
so I
that?
got my
You
notes in
talk-
front of me.
there
So
you
I'll
go.
be at C2E2 in Chicago on Friday. So Friday at 4:15, the seminar is called Expanding Video Game Worlds in Books. So I'm one of the speakers. We have another pretty awesome group of speakers actually for this
Yeah.
particular panel presentation.
Who else will be there?
I didn't write down everybody's names. It literally changed like
Okay.
every week who was going to be on it. So I
It'll
had
be
to write- I
like
had to write down
several
just the
people
date
who
'cause
are
it changed.
almost as cool as Ken.
Yeah. So, but if you're at C2E2, I'll be there all weekend. And if you find me, I'm more happy to talk to you. But otherwise, I'll be sitting at that panel.
And we are actually looking into as well, seeing if there is going to be a live stream of that panel or a video recording of that panel. If there is a video recording of that, then look for probably a VOD embedded in our next Halo community update. So if we end up with some good video of that, we'll definitely bring that to you. But I think regardless, the Spartan 4 handbook is definitely something that we'll want to talk a little bit more about. And probably next week, actually, maybe a little bit. We'll look at diving in a little bit into kind of what that is. It is actually it's geared towards a little bit of a different audience. So
Yeah.
it's not don't expect like a super deep diving kind of tech manual. Don't expect like Mythos level or really especially like a Warfleet level. Something a little bit more surface. However, we always do love throwing in new elements and things to keep all of you deep diving folks intrigued as well.
Oh yeah,
It'll definitely be worth picking up. But it'll
there'll
be
be Halopedia entries
yeah,
updated. And
it'll
Halo
be
Wiki
really cool
updates.
for new fans as well, and specifically actually for kind of like a younger generation of fans geared towards that. So we've got that. We've got all sorts of stuff coming up. We actually have a community play date actually going on right now. So as soon as you turn this off, you want to try to earn the Ice Unicorn skin, jump into Halo 5, jump in the Halo 3 Classic Throwback playlist, and you will probably encounter Bravo and Uni, maybe Strong Side, maybe Rob Bowen. There's some folks upstairs actually playing while we are nerding out with you guys down here. We should have a Halo community update next week, and the big kahuna from an esports perspective. I know that you guys are lore folks, but I know that some of you guys are closet competition fans as well. Hidden Xperia, I'm looking at you.
Not me.
Yes, not you. He does not do the esports. But we have the Halo World Championship finals next weekend as well, which is going to be really cool. So if you are in Seattle for that, make sure you stop and say hi.
The pizza skin is canon.
The pizza skin is well, skins are canon. Pizza is canon.
And while we're giving shout outs, I would like to give a shout out to the mod creators that are doing some pretty amazing mod stuff right now.
Yes,
in
absolutely.
particular, I like to Operation Trebuchet.
Yep.
Definitely check out what they're doing if you like Arma and you like
We should
Milsim.
maybe highlight them sometime soon.
Yeah. I've only sent you information
I
to
know.
put an
Okay.
article
All right. That's
about
enough.
that.
All right. We're never gonna have Ken on again. All right. We definitely actually plan on highlighting some really cool community projects like that. And the only reason it hasn't been done so far is not this guy's fault. I can assure you. But also a shout out to folks like Sons of the Prophets guys as well, who are always working really close. And shout out to everybody who participated in the Yappening, both internally and in the community. We partner with a lot of really cool community partners, DJ Blue and Breaking the Clutch and Team Respawn and everybody like on Waypoint and our Halo Wars and Reddit, just more than we can count, but we had a lot of really cool partnerships with the community for that. We had a lot of fun with it, playing around, and I'm not sure if you've seen, heard the last from Yap Yap, especially his Twitter account. Just saying. So if you wanna follow the Yap Yap on Twitter, just follow at the real Yap Yap on Twitter. It sounds like I'm making it up. I'm absolutely not.
This is real life.
This is real life. Well, guys, thank you so much again for joining us for our next lore stream. Oh, before we go, I just happen to have a copy of Mythos right here.
Shocking.
What? You've actually got 2/3 of the author crew right here, and the other third couldn't be with us today because that's Jeremy Patnow.
Already signed that one?
So we haven't signed it, but we'll sign it right now. So let's see what should we have them? What should they tweet at me? What's a good hashtag?
I don't know.
I know he doesn't do the Twitters.
See you next summer, Halo.
What?
That's why I was signed in your books. See you next
that's
summer.
don't say that because then they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, dates and release dates and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, we're gonna
That
set
is
it.
not
That's
what
like,
that is.
Darn it!
Jeez, we almost
All
made
that
it the
media
whole
training.
stream.
And
Yeah. All right. So I'm signing this. Kenneth's
Oh.
gonna sign this and not speak anymore. No. And then we'll also have Jeremy sign it too. So let's do. What's Liz in the back? Liz, shout out by the way to Liz, who is our technical wizard in the back, making all this happen.
Chuckling at us.
We need actually do hashtag rings of destruction. That's what it'll be. So text me at GrimBrother1. Hashtag Spock the cat. Yeah. Text me your favorite part of today's stream and hashtag it with rings of destruction, and I will pull out a random tweet and we'll send you this almost completely signed copy of Halo Mythos. Again, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We look forward to hanging out with you again. Don't forget to catch the Halo World Championships next weekend, also right here on Mixer.com/Halo. Love you. Goodbye.